Heading into week 3 of the fantasy football season, I'm going to give you 6 starts and 3 sits at the wide receiver position. I'm not going to tell you obvious names that you should obviously start. I'm going to try and get you some wide receiver 2, 3 flex options, maybe guys that are on the edge, and either give you some confidence to start them or to sit them. Why don't you comment down below and tell me your start sit questions? And please be aware that we go live Saturday nights, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to answer all of your questions live. All right, number 1, you can start DRIZZY Drake London at the Seattle Seahawks. The Seahawks currently give up the 8th fewest fantasy points to wide receivers. However, in week 1, it was Javonte who got most work through the air. So this Seahawks team is not necessarily good like against fantasy wide receivers. They've just been beaten on the ground. In week 1, it was Javonte. He got work through the air. In week 2, the 49ers just dominated through the run game. So it's really difficult to say at this point that the Seahawks are good against fantasy wide receivers. I still think this is a very favorable matchup for Drake London. You can't point to a defender who's going to match up against Drake London on the Seattle Seahawks team. Drake London looks like the real deal, the alpha in Atlanta. After week 1, I had the confidence to start him personally for myself in my own home leagues. I did that last week. He returned that favor, and now I just feel even more confidence to tell you guys now that it is safe to start Drake London. So far in 2022, week 1, 5 catches on 7 targets for 74 yards. In week 2, 8 receptions on 12 targets, 86 yards and a touchdown. 9.5 targets per game through the first 2 weeks. Now, of course, 2 weeks isn't a safe sample size, but let's not make this harder than it needs to be, people. Drake London is a feature of this offense, and Marcus Mariota is not afraid to go to him. Start Drake London with confidence as a wide receiver 2 this week. I think he has a great chance to finish top 24. My second start of the week is Curtis Samuel. I love that I'm able to do this right now, and I hope I'm not wrong, but I really feel like you can start Curtis Samuel. I'm a Commanders fan if you don't know. I was really excited to see Curtis last year. It's cool to see how they're using him this year. They're facing the Eagles this week, which are very much middle of the pack against fantasy wide receivers. This defense just dominated the Minnesota Vikings, dominated them. I understand we're going to talk about that in a second. Is Darius Slay going to play? We saw him injured. We're not sure what his status will be. If he plays, I believe that he's going to have give Terry McLaurin the treatment that he gave Justin Jefferson last week, which is going to put Curtis Samuel in some relatively favorable situations, in my opinion. This is less about matchup than it is about opportunities. And just like Drake London is a feature for the Falcons, Curtis Samuel has become a feature for this Commanders offense, and I love it. Through 2 weeks, Curtis Samuel has 20 targets, 10 per game, 15 receptions, 7.5 per game, 5 carries, 25 total touches, 171 total yards, over 85 yards per game. And in fantasy, he has finished as the wide receiver 13 and 11. The Eagles are absolutely going to be able to put up points on this Commanders defense. There is no question in my mind that Jalen Hurts will have a field day, but that is going to put Carson Wentz and this offense in a position where they need to score points, which is going to mean Curtis Samuel will be very, very necessary. So while it is risky, I feel like the opportunity is what I'm leaning on here with Curtis Samuel in week 2. Start him as a flex. You can rely on this guy as a flex right here in week 3. The third wide receiver that you can start here in week 3 is Allen Robinson at the Arizona Cardinals. This was one of the players that I told everyone to trade for last week before he relatively redeemed himself, a 15-plus point game. If you watched this game, you would have seen one of the strangest calls, though. One of the strangest calls of the week. We all thought Allen Robinson had surely locked up his second touchdown of the day on a beautiful play call by Sean McVay, only to see the officials stop the play as it was happening, pretty much like as the play was over and Allen Robinson was in the end zone. The officials stopped the play for an injury, which was so strange. So we were very close to a 22-plus point performance for Allen Robinson last week, but he looked great. He got open, he had opportunities, and Sean McVay found ways to use him. He's going to continue to do that versus an Arizona Cardinals defense that got torched by Pat Mahomes in week 1. In week 2, the Cardinals came out in the second half, were actually pretty good defensively, but Matt Stafford and Derek Carr aren't in the same category for me. I trust A-Rob again here in week 3. He should be started again as a wide receiver 2/3. My 4th start of the week at the wide receiver position, and bear with me for a second because I understand there is risk here, but it's Amari Cooper versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is going to be a Thursday night football game. So if you're watching this after Thursday and I missed, I'm sorry. I understand there is risk here, but I feel like he's a really good flex option here in week 3 versus the Steelers. As of right now, the Steelers give up the 4th most fantasy points to wide receivers, and Jacoby Brissett after week 1, who, pretty much openly admitted that he didn't prioritize Amari Cooper enough. He comes back in week 2 and delivers on that promise. Cooper finished with 9 receptions on 10 targets for 101 yards and a TUD. And he was shadowed by Sauce Gardner most of that day. He reminded everyone why he is one of the elite NFL route runners and deserves our respect here in week 2. While I understand it's risky, Pittsburgh's defense to me seems far less scary without TJ Watt consistently putting pressure on the quarterback. So in a game that I think should be close, I think Amari Cooper is guaranteed to get about 8 targets. What can he do with that? I'm not sure. But if he gets 8 targets, there's enough talent with Amari Cooper that I think it could be worth a flex option. So give me Amari Cooper as a start here in week 3. My 5th start of the week is Tyler Lockett versus the Atlanta Falcons. The Falcons right now are getting torched on defense. They give up the 3rd most fantasy points to wide receivers. DK, he seems to have a back injury. I think he'll probably play through it. But what was good for Lockett last week was DK was really the guy that the defense focused on, which allowed Lockett to really operate freely. And he carved out a really nice role for himself in week 2. He was Geno's safety blanket pretty much the entire game as they had to come back. And I think this is going to be a competitive game, so Lockett will be necessary. In week 2, he had 9 receptions on 11 targets for 107 yards. And again, the Falcons just gave up 3 touchdowns to wide receivers in week 2. This is not a very good secondary. I consider Tyler Lockett a pretty decent flex. Now there is boom, there is bust potential with Tyler Lockett, but if he's going to be this safety blanket while DK is getting not double teamed, that sounds weird. While he's getting double covered rather, then there could be a really safe floor here for Tyler Lockett in week 3 versus the Falcons. My 6th start of the week really goes to 2 different players that I think you can start, and that's Julio Jones and Russell Gage. I think these are both guys that, probably more of a desperation play, not my most confident plays, but I think you can start these guys here in week 6 versus the Packers. Packers currently give up the 5th fewest points to the position. However, Tom Brady needs somebody to throw to, and it's not going to be Mike Evans. Mike Evans is out because he's suspended for the Marshawn Lattimore situation. So we don't know if Julio Jones plays. That's why I put both of these players. If Julio plays, you can start him. If Russell plays, you can start him. Julio and Russell both present enough upside with Mike Evans out to be like decent flex options. Now, are there other players I'd rather start over them? 100% yes. But in week 1, Julio Jones played 52% of the snaps. He saw 69 yards on 5 targets. That was with Mike Evans in the lineup. In week 2, Russell Gage led the team with 5 catches. Tom and this team will get on the right page. Tom Brady's offense is not going to crumble. It will succeed. It just takes time for them to develop with what they have. So Russell Gage, Julio Jones, both good options here in week 3. And if Julio's out, Gage is a must start. And to end the video, I'm going to give you 3 sits of the week. And some of these are in categories. And I know I'm not going to hit on every single one of these takes, but I feel good about this list this week. Sit any Chiefs wide receiver, literally any Chiefs wide receiver. They should not be in your starting roster right now. The Colts give up the 10th fewest points to wide receivers, but this isn't about the Colts defense, and this isn't about Patrick Mahomes. It has everything to do with the unpredictability of this Kansas City Chiefs wide receiver core. In 2 games so far, check this out. McCole Hardman, 9 points per game, 5 targets per game. Juju, 7.4 points per game, 5.5 targets per game. MVS, 5 and 5.5 targets per game. Justin Watson, 6.4 points per game, 1.5 targets per game. And Sky Moore is just not involved just yet. So you tell me who to start. And that's my point. If you don't know who to start on a weekly basis, if there's no consistency, and if the quarterback himself has said it will be someone different every week, let's say you go out and start Juju this week. Maybe he's the guy. Maybe he's not. But what if MVS gets a 60-yard touchdown and he gets 10 targets? Point being is I don't know who you can start, which means I don't want to rely my week on the uncertainties. There will be someone who is very valuable here. I just couldn't tell you who it is. The second group that I want to sit is any Giants wide receiver. Okay, before the year, there's talk about Wan'Dale Robinson, maybe Kenny Golladay, maybe Sterling Shepard or Kadarius Toney returning value. They go up against the Cowboys, who give up the 11th most points to fantasy wide receivers. But just like I mentioned with the Chiefs, who the hell do you start here? In week 1, Sterling Shepard was the most valuable guy. He had 2 receptions, though, on a touchdown. Not very reliable. In week 2, it was Richie James and David Sills, who were the most valuable wide receivers in fantasy. Point being, there's no wide receiver on this team that you can rely on. Toney looks incredible. I don't understand why they're not using him more. But right now, you cannot start him. This is Saquon Barkley's team. It will run through Saquon. And whatever wide receiver it is on whatever week is going to be impossible to predict. My third sit is Elijah Moore. The Bengals give up the 6th fewest points to the position. I really do love Elijah Moore as a talent. But as someone who has him in my home league, there are multiple options that I am starting over Elijah Moore this week because I just can't trust him at this point. I said it last week. I don't know what to do with Elijah Moore right now. He doesn't seem to be prioritized in target share. And that just continued in week 2. By the way, in both games this year, Wilson had more targets and more yards. Garrett Wilson, that is. Most recently in week 2, Garrett Wilson had 14 targets to Elijah's 5. Joe Flacco seems to trust Garrett Wilson at this point, and it's going to be Joe Flacco again here in week 3. So everyone who said that it was Elijah over Garrett this year so far, that doesn't seem to be the case. That can change, but it doesn't seem like a reliable option. So look elsewhere. It sucks. I like Elijah Moore as well as a talent, but you can't look at 5 targets he just got and think that that's something that you can rely on moving forward. If he has a spike week, let's talk about it. We need to see consistency though. So I'm looking elsewhere outside of Elijah Moore this week. Those are my starts and my sits. Comment down below and tell me what you love, what you don't love. And keep in mind that we go live Saturday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to answer your live questions. Drop a like, comment on this video, and subscribe. Huge love. Good luck this week in week 3.
Yo, what's good? Thanks for watching. We got a lot more videos.
A lot more.
If you want more videos.
Watch
now,
it.
You can also subscribe.
Right now.
If you want to.
You need to.
And lastly, don't forget that you can sign up to support the show and get exclusive content by going to patreon.com/FantasyLand fam.